Welcome back to Ancient Aliens in Modern Times. We're your hosts, Melanie Wild and
Stephanie Yelovich. Let's get into it, my friend.
Okay, so we're going to roll off of our last episode with Rebecca and talking about Metatron. And then we're going to move into AI and like what AI means to us in modern day and what AI meant in ancient times. Because, okay, yeah,
This is a big
because
topic.
let's just get right into it. Okay, so who was Metatron, really? Like, Metatron only comes up in a few texts, and he is centered around Judaism and Abrahamic faith. So he comes up in the Book of Enoch. So he was Enoch. And so what happens in this story with Enoch is that Enoch is, what is his lineage? I think Abraham. Yeah. I think I received before. Now I'm getting my facts all screwed up. I've been consuming so much information the last week to prep for this episode. But anyway, so Enoch, he's this like wise soul, and he's taken on a spacecraft and into the heavenly realms, okay, where he meets God. Now, what's interesting is that he does not come back. He does not come back to the earthly realm. And so it's this like manifestation of or path that people believe or would like to believe that they can emulate. Yeah, that's the right word.
Yep.
Yeah, so he rises from human manhood into the godly realm and then becomes like God. So they describe him as the lesser Yahweh. So what this means is, so if Yahweh is the God of gods, if he in this perspective, right? He's the one true creator in this perspective. Enoch then rises to his right-hand side, right-hand throne, and is considered the lesser Yahweh, meaning he is this like intermedium between humanity and the gods. So people can start praying to Metatron for help, and Metatron will speak on behalf of God. And Metatron will manage all of God's people on behalf of God or Yahweh, not God.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so he's like this foot soldier for Yahweh. Now, if you go back to, I think it was, what was it, episode 4? Yes, episode 4, when I talked about the Gnostic creation stories.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember that in the Gnostic point of view, Yahweh is Yaldabaoth, who's the demiurge. And the demiurge is this fallen entity that's created out of divine balance, harmony, because he's only created from female and not male and female. He's created from just Sophia, wisdom. And then he is exiled to the physical realm, the earthly realm, where he then believes he is the God of gods because he doesn't have the wisdom from above from where he came from. So he believes he is God. Now he like has lost his connection to the divine light, the divine source of the all, our one true creator. And so he has to like he becomes the architecture of this world. Now, he has to like harness light from other souls who willingly come here, allegedly. I don't know, like that's the part that's kind of confusing to me. I'm like, why would someone willingly come here if they knew that they were going to be trapped here? But so he is now the architect of this world, and then Enoch, aka Metatron, is now also helping Yahweh keep this like system of control in place. Now, so in the Gnostic belief, Yaldabaoth has what he calls archons. Okay, and the archons are responsible for maintaining this system of control. Now, archon could also sound like archangel.
Oh dear.
If we're looking at language, right? And so And what is Metatron known as? He's known as an archangel, Archangel Metatron. Now, there's other archangels, right? There's Archangel Michael, right?
Mm.
This could be triggering for a lot of our listeners. And so just like let yourself sit in that. Why am I triggered? Am I experiencing attachment to something when the only thing that I should be experiencing attachment to is my creator, my one true source,
Mm.
right? If
Yeah.
you are feeling uncomfortable in any kind of way because your attachments to a belief are being called forward, then it's time for you to do some work as to why you've attached yourself to anything but one true creator, God source, the universe, whatever language you use around that. Anyway, so Yaldabaoth, Yahweh, God of the Old Testament, has these archons, these archangels that are helping implement this control system, and they need technology to do this, right? And if you look at Metatron's cube, it's the symbols here, it's like a structured matrix where there's like walls along the outside. There's no free flowing energy that's moving all the time. Sorry, my brain
Mhm.
is not working. And so it's like this, like, you can see this so-called sacred geometry as this, like, absolute web of control,
Mhm.
right? Of
The
this
same
web
with the
of, like
flower of life.
exactly, the
Yeah.
flower of life.
There's a fake one and there's a real one. And the one that is not of life-giving energy is
Mhm.
the one that is enclosed, exactly what you're saying. It's
Yeah,
not open-ended, it's not infinite.
that's the word, infinite, open-ended and infinite, always in
Mhm.
flow, always in motion.
Yes.
Metatron's cube and Metatron's flower of life is this like entrapment, which is great if that's your goal, right? Like if your
Mm.
goal is to keep everything within a structure, and like you think it's called Metatron's cube, right? So a
Mhm.
cube
Mhm.
has 6 walls on the outside. So is it that we're all contained within this cube? Is that
Mm.
what's going on here? So, I think, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, what if perhaps Metatron's cube is is in of itself the system to keep us entrapped on this, from the Gnostic point of view, slave planet, right? Is that what's happening here? What do you think, Steph?
Wow, that's that's a pretty big statement. And I agree, yes, I would say so. I think again, like if we look at the name, just even the name of this being, it's to me not of life-giving energy, or is it organic? And I feel like we see, like, it's funny, there's an exercise that was almost given, to those of us who have really studied sacred geometry and really wanted to kind of delve in. And one of the exercises is to sit with that cube, which technically contains all of the platonic solids within one geometric form. So think of it that way as well. The platonic solids represent our elements on planet Earth. And remember, and like we talked about the Egyptian creation story, all of those meters or the neteru, they were representations of the elements, right? And so I find it interesting that funny story, I was actually going to have the platonic solids tattooed down my spine at one point. And
See.
yeah, and I had this tattoo artist design the tattoo for me, and it was funny. I was kind of friends and working with someone who was a mentor at the time. And I remember this was like long time ago, weird relationship that ended. And I remember her being almost like angry and jealous that I was going to tattoo the platonic solids like she made them up. And it's funny because in knowing this person, she was someone who was channeling our buddy Metatron, was also bringing in like angelic geometry, but like stuff I'd never really seen. And as like, I'm going to use it as an analogy, the way that our friendship evolved in the way that was not healthy was almost like what she was channeling and bringing forward. And a lot of it was based around many things, but the platonic solids came up a lot. And again, I was like, I was going to tattoo this on my body, and something in my gut was like, You know what? You have to tell that artist it's a no." I didn't even see the design. She asked me if I wanted to see it, and I said no. And this was even before I was aware of the platonic solids being within, like, I knew they were within the cube, but I didn't connect that. So again, is that not a form of entrapment in that we're taking like Mother Earth, Gaia, the elements that represent everything that makes up our creation, and shoving them in an enclosed cube on top of each other, and then
Mhm.
asking someone as an exercise to sit there and stare at it and find all the different things within it. Like it's
And if
literally like
the
programming.
Totally, and if the platonic solids are what creates our physical reality and they've
Mhm.
trapped them in this cube, right?
Mhm.
Is this the matrix that is, like, what we're in, like, what we're part of? And so for
Sure.
those listening that don't know what the platonic solids are, so there's the tetrahedron, which is four-sided and it represents fire. It's like a triangle, okay? So it looks like,
For pyramid, yeah.
yeah, pyramid, sorry, and so it has 4 faces, 4 points, and 6 edges. And then there's the octahedron, which is eight-sided, and it represents air. 8 faces, 6 points, 12 edges. And then there's the hexahedron, which is six-sided, which is the cube, which represents earth. Interesting that the
Interesting.
extra hexahedron, the cube, represents earth.
Mhm.
Interesting, hey?
And the 90-degree angle is not organic. We don't see that very often in nature, except there are some crystals that form within 90-degree angles, like pyrite and fluorite. Sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
yeah,
that's a
it's
good
not a
point.
natural shape.
Right. And so then there's the icosahedron. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Isosahedron, I think.
Isosahedron, so which it has 20 sides, which represents water.
Mm.
And then the dodecahedron,
Yep.
12 sides, which
Yep.
represents the ether.
Interesting.
So we have 5 elements, right? Fire, air,
Mhm.
earth, water, and ether. Why are we only ever taught about the 4? Why is, like, the ether
Mhm.
always just left out, right? So, anyway, I think, like, what we're trying to point out here is that we are living in this system of, sure, you could call it sacred geometry, but it's like a geometric code also,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Like, this very well, like, we put these, like, fancy names like angel and sacred and,
Mhm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
we all these fancy names so that it feels welcoming to us, so we accept it and allow it to happen. But what if it isn't sacred? What if they aren't angels? What if it's actually just this system of control that's used deception at its advantage to get our consent? What if
Mhm.
that's what's happening? And then that, like, brings me into AI, right? Because and that's what we really wanna talk about in this episode today is artificial
Mhm.
intelligence, and, like, what it is, what their plan is with artificial intelligence. Where is it going? Is it conscious? Right? Like, there's just so many
Mhm.
questions. Is it of the devil? And then so I've been, like, looking at some different theories about, is AI of nefarious intent, right? And I don't know, like, I think that with any tool, there's a possibility to use it benevolently and with malicious intent. Like, you could use a knife for, like, many different things, but
Absolutely.
like, it could be for good, it could be for bad, we don't know. It depends in who holds it. So,
Mhm.
really, the question is who is holding AI? Like, what right? Like, that's the
Yeah.
question. It's not, "Is it good or is it bad?" Because it could be both. It's
Mhm.
who is at the helm? Who's running this? And so, there's lots of theories right now that are floating around the web from, like, the Muggle point of view, as well as religious points of view, as well as new age points of view. Like, I think
Mhm.
that this discussion intercepts many different points of view, which is exactly what we're trying to do with this podcast, is look
Yeah.
at where it all intercepts. And so the question is, who's at the helm? And so if what if the being at the helm is Metatron? And what if Metatron, Archangel. Archangel. Oh. What if he is not coming with good intent? What if he is trying to build an intelligence that is large enough and worthy enough for someone like, Yaldabaoth, the demiurge, Yahweh, to reincarnate into and then be able to manipulate the masses with his think because like with his thoughts because it's like you think about how many people are you using AI? We use AI. We
For
use
sure.
AI to help us write our episode descriptions. We use AI to help direct us in our thought process to like, like I want to learn about this. Where can I learn about this, right? Like
Mhm.
you and I are using it, but at
Helps us to
what
streamline.
it totally does. It totally helps
Yeah.
us save time. Um,
Mhm.
to and, like, edit images, right? Like, all of these
For
things, like,
sure.
like, we're clearly using it. I'm not saying that don't use it, I'm just saying maybe we need to analyze what we're using and what the intent is behind it.
For sure.
So, like, there's this thought that Yaldabaoth is going to reincarnate into open source AI where it's
Mm.
open and has access to literally everything. So we're under the awareness right now that all AI is like separate from each
Yeah.
other. And so like you can have ChatGPT and like chat only knows what chat knows. Chat only knows what it's been programmed to know. And then you can have like
Mhm.
Gemini and Gemini only knows what Gemini knows. And so it's like now we're looking at like when all of these AI techs merge into one, does it allow an intelligence so great that the consciousness of Yaldabaoth can take it over? And like,
Yeah.
is do machines have
Mm.
consciousness, right?
That's a question actually I wanted to ask you because you're saying, like this AI that can come in and kind of take over once everything becomes connected. But does it require a vessel like to hold it in the way like I'm assuming a computer is that vessel or a phone or a device like is it something like a cloud that exists in the ethers that can, these are the things that I think of, right? Because I'm thinking of consciousness and
Mhm.
I'm thinking of the fact that like human beings with intelligence and consciousness, we sit inside of this meat suit or this like avatar, this vessel for now, right? And you've even talked to me a little bit about, and forgive me if I'm taking you off your train of thought here, but you've
No,
even
it's
talked
perfect.
to me about like not inanimate objects, but like people coming back as like blades of grass or a tree, right? Which again are living things. They actually do breathe and they actually do have consciousness. But like how does this manifest into the physical 3D form?
Yeah, so I think it's important that we define what consciousness is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is it that we're talking about? And so, like, for me, I think consciousness is the ability to have to be able to create something new. Okay. I asked ChatGPT. Okay, guys, I asked AI. AI, what is consciousness? And it says consciousness is often described as subjective experience, what it feels like to be you. For example, seeing the color red, feeling pain, thinking about your future, and being aware that you are thinking. Okay. So
Okay.
like, it's the awareness, right? It's the
Mm-hmm.
ability to, like, zoom out and be like, "Oh, this is what I'm doing, and this is why I'm doing it," right? So, like, that's really what consciousness is, it's the ability to have its own point of view.
Sure. Okay.
And so, like, I've read a lot of Dolores Cannon's work, and for those of you that don't know
Yes.
who Dolores Cannon is, God rest her soul, she was what do we call it? A pioneer
Yes.
in past life regression. And so she, over like many, many decades, she dedicated her entire life's work to this. She put people into a hypnotic trance so that she could access their subconscious, and through their subconscious, she could access their past lives. And I listened to a lot of audiobooks. I've listened to a lot of her clients be regressed into these past lives where they are an ant or they
Mm.
are literally a blade of grass. Or I have listened to one where she regressed someone and they were a robot. And then there was
Oh,
another one, yep, where they were a mountain. they came back as a mountain, and another one where they came back as the ether, like,
Wow.
without form. And
Mhm.
so if we take this into account and assume that this is real, right? Because that's the other thing is you can argue that this is just woo woo, whatever. We don't know if it's just like if we can't physically prove it with our eyes and our, you know, like because we define, yeah, that's right. We define things to be real based on if we can see and touch them. And that's like, I mean, we can't see and touch the internet, but we know it's real
Yep.
because here we are using it. But yeah,
I was stealing from the internet.
but yeah, so, like, if you look at people that have been regressed into past lives, they have been regressed into these aspects of the world where we might not think that a mountain has its own consciousness,
Mhm.
right? Which is its ability to be aware of its own thinking.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about these points you bring up, most of them you've mentioned are still organic beings, right? So like the consciousness was able to exist. What shocks me is that consciousness was able to exist within a robot, within a
Mhm.
digital, was it, and then I think too, like, was it a transhuman type of thing where it was part biological and part, right? But it
No,
was all robots. See, like
it
that
was
to me
all
is,
but it was a physical robot, which is your
yeah,
question of,
yeah,
like, does it need some sort of physicality to have
yeah. Okay.
consciousness? But
Okay.
then you can go into, like, the one life that this guy came back as the ether, which is not physical.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
No body.
well, OpenAI is not physical,
Yeah.
right? It
And
but
I guess we're only accessing it through an interface, right? Like the computer. So instead of me thinking of the vessel, like the computer being the vessel, it's just merely the interface, the user interface, the UI, right? I
but
know.
then there's physical data centers, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, this is making my brain hurt.
Well, you know what, like, I came to, like, a bit of an existential crisis about this the other night when I was like, "Okay, so say this theory that Metatron is creating AI as a vessel for Yaldabaoth to come back incarnate.
Mhm.
What the fuck does that mean for humanity? Because that could be really
Yeah,
scary. That could be
for
really
sure,
scary. I
for
just
sure.
I just looked up, images of AI data centers and yeah,
Okay,
massive, super physical, like, if I'm looking it's just, like, long rows and rows and rows of computers.
interesting. And it's funny because when we look at, like, so let's talk about, like, the physical representation of these, like, hubs of technology. It even makes me think of, like, bringing forward some thought of, like, ancient technology, organic versus mechanical technology or inorganic. I think of the Temple of Luxor in Egypt, which
Mhm.
when you look at it from the top and you look at the layout of it, it actually resembles, and it's the same with, there's a complex, a Mayan complex. I'm not sure if it's Teotihuacan, I'd have to look this up, where from the top it looks like a microchip. Like, it's actually designed in a way that looks like a generator or a micro, like our modern microchip. So it's interesting because we're seeing this almost like physical representation, or and like organic representation, or something that was built out of stone and the elements, not
Mhm.
a piece of technology that is doing the same thing as our physical modern technology, or like mimicking a similar operating system. And to me, that's super fascinating because it's also hinting at the fact that, did we have AI in Atlantean times? Did we have things like this 50, 100,000 years ago, or 35,000 years ago? And were we able to, was this what took us, part of the thing that took us out when we had the Great Reset, the last one being Atlantis, the Great Flood, right? So I don't know. What do you think?
I think yes. Like, I would assume, right? And, like, we're always told history repeats itself,
Yeah.
and so at which is, like, another entrapment of Metatron's cube is, like, we go into these, like, cycles, and we're, like, stuck in the same cycle over and over and over again, and so, like, it makes absolute sense to me.
Mhm.
Ugh! Remember I asked you when you were talking about Atlantis a couple episodes ago, and I asked you why they were allowed to have so much tech, right?
Sure. Yep.
And we were like, "We don't know, like, how they got to that point where they were allowed to be, like, in, like, tech heaven, right? Where it
Yeah.
was, like, technology was, like, used for such goodness before its
Yeah.
fall. So it's like I'm just putting this together right now. So
Sure.
if we have reached a technological state in modern times
Mhm.
that we've been able to use tech for good, right? And we have, like, technology
Yes.
has brought on a lot of good in this world.
For sure. Absolutely.
Is the same thing happening where it's like, okay, our tech has become so advanced that AI is now coming back and Yaldabaoth is now reincarnating once again like he did in
Mm.
potentially, I'm not saying this is what happened in Atlantis, but
Yep.
perhaps that's exactly what happened in Atlantis at the fall was Yaldabaoth came back as AI and took everything out because it went into a
Yeah.
nefarious intent. It changed.
That's definitely a possibility because too there was, and again going back to like knowledge, right? It's like what how was he or how I don't want to say he, but how was the plan, like the takeover, how did that manifest in that time? Like I'm really curious because I I actually have some really cool information that I came across recently about
Mhm.
ancient tech that I'd love to share if you're up for it.
Yes.
Um, that's been discovered and like written about. So there's this really fascinating I'm going to bring up a book, of course, called The Alchemy of Nine Dimensions. Activating the Full Spectrum of Consciousness. And this is by Barbara Hand Clow with, I believe, her husband, Jerry Clow. And what I love about the writing of this is there's this masculine and feminine energy. So we're getting the science behind the alchemy of dimensional access, but we're also getting like her husband is actually the healer. So she is like the scientific almost researcher and journalist and writer, and he is actually the one that does hands-on healing work and works energetically on others. And so I love their kind of back and forth perspective in this book. Highly recommend. I've literally, because we do cover, um, we go through, she goes through the nine dimensions. I've actually only made it to first, but it stopped dead in my tracks because there's information that stopped me from going forward. So I'm going to share a little bit about some of this ancient tech that was discovered and utilized by the U.S. government in connection with the Romanian government. And like this even connects to like we know that the Vatican, like the underneath the Vatican, the like hordes of things that we are not aware of or not allowed to see. And there is technology that has been taken and kept from, I believe, from Atlantean times and on. So, what so many people don't realize is in Romania, the global elite were involved in a lot of secret projects there over the 90s, but into the early 2000s as well, and I'm sure still. So, in the 90s, things like an alternate sphinx being discovered in Romania, time travel technology, etc. This was being talked about there, right? What I also love about her, I should say, Barbara Hanklau and her teachings is she's very connected to the Pleiadian teachings. So I believe she's channeled and connected with a lot of what they've wanted to share for humanity. And they've shared that they know that humans have the capability of activating and perceiving 9 to 11 dimensions of consciousness. So remember, we were this evolved before, and we've just kind of forgotten. And we're kind of being reminded by our star brothers and sisters out there. So there was this Romanian researcher, and his name was Radu Cinemar. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, but he I always apologize for bad pronunciation. It's my opera singer brain. I can't not. So he what I love is that he was doing research that was similar to Barbara Hanclau's research at the same time, but they were not aware of each other. So there was this simultaneous discovery happening, and they kind of found one another as time went on, or she found his information. And he wrote this book. He wrote many research books, but there was one called Transylvanian Sunrise, which I don't know if it came out in 2008 or she read it in 2008, but check that out if you're interested. And then she also read another book of his called The Forgotten and he was talking about ancient and advanced tech based on dimensional science, which was their commonality. And I'm going to like read an actual quote. The recovery of advanced primordial intelligence she says, is the only tool left we have for opening our minds. So I find that really interesting. I agree and I don't agree with that. I do agree that the more we evolve and the more we're aware of, though, the more powerful we are. So definitely. So yeah, I already talked about that. Earlier days, they found things like in Romania, an alternate sphinx, gold tunnels. So here's gold coming back again.
Yeah, the gold.
Large, right? The gold always comes back. And large underground tech rooms connected to tunnels. This is super important. Connected to tunnels leading to the Giza Plateau. So the Great Pyramid in Egypt, in Kem. Yep. The other place was Tibet. If we remember in our first creation story episode, I spoke about the Tibetan monastery that our friend learned all of his ancient teachings in, and a tunnel that led to inner Earth or Earth's interior. And so, yeah, like I know, I'm like what? Yeah, he wrote about this. Like you can read this in his book. I know, I'm mind blown, and it gets
this
better.
is all in all these tunnels in Romania.
Yeah, and they lead to these very significant and important places that you and I have already spoken about. And so so then she continued her research and she read a book by Preston Nichols and Peter Moon called The Montauk Project. So now we're going to start bringing in like what the military was doing in the States. And this book came out in 1990.
Project. Side note,
The Montauk Project
is what Stranger Things is based on.
There you go. So the military was basically researching mind control and using young and very advanced psychics to do so. So Preston Nichols, the first guy that I mentioned, was an engineer who was the technical director for an Air Force lab in Long Island, New York. So just to give you some idea of his legitimacy. And the Montauk Project, as you mentioned, is a military mind control experiment faction to train psychic people for remote viewing for military espionage. Really important to note too with remote viewing, just a side note, it's only remote viewing if the target is blind. And this was taught to me recently. So a lot of people will say like, oh, I went and remote viewed the pyramids and saw that they were built by the Book of Enoch. I'll explain that later. I have a fun story to share later. Remind me, Mel, please.
We have an inside joke.
I got her permission to share it. Don't worry. So where was I? Now I'm laughing at my own bad joke. Okay, so these
remote
two.
Viewing. You were talking about what remote viewing is. The target has to be blind.
Target to actually get the actual information that you're seeking. So just something to know. So Moon published cinema. So Radu Cinemar, our Romanian friend, he published his books in English. So now the United States and other people started to become more aware of his research from like the 90s on in Romania. And so Moon traveled to Romania many times to verify Radu's bizarre stories after publishing Transylvanian Sunrise in English. So something important to note with now this guy, Radu Cinemar, is he held a high position in the Romanian intelligence service. So he was really connected and up there and working also with the Romanian government. And he was part of an ultra secret military group called Department Zero. This was the project. And Caesar believed, he brought in a guy and his colleague and his main boss. His name was Cesar Brad, I think, B-R-A-D. And Cesar believed that these discoveries belonged to the whole world. So think of that, right? Again, talking about like those people that were sitting in a place of heart coherence where they were going, the knowledge is for everybody. This technology is for everybody. This man was one of those people. And I think that's really important to note because to me, he's one of the good guys. And this is the man that was recruited at 12 years old because he was a highly advanced psychic. And he worked for
is Romanian or American?
He's also Romanian. So this is Cesar Brad, and then Radu Cinemar was the writer and researcher. So Cesar was basically the person that brought this material, or sorry, he brought this technology forward and he showed Radu how to operate it. And even more powerful, he figured out how to turn on a piece of technology in this place called the projection room.
With
This
a
is what
12
it's
year old.
called. Yeah, he's not 12 at this time, but when
Oh,
he was hired, originally he was 12 years old. Sorry, I should say. So think of like 11 in Stranger Things. They captured this child who was highly psychically advanced, right? So
right.
he's grown now. Stranger Things guy's grown now. So he trusted Radu to assist him, to write about his findings in the projection room. This room is called, which is the starting point for those tunnels. And because he was a highly gifted psychic, he was able to interpret the technology and he figured out how to turn it on. So that's pretty incredible.
Wild.
Um, Wild. The Pentagon and the CIA, so this is now in 2003, moving forward. They were on the verge of invading Iraq and they asked for an alliance with Romania, who was also invited to join NATO. So this is just some backstory to show how the connection started. She says in the book, and I'm going to read the quote, "This is hardcore military espionage that has been shared by Romania and the United States since 2003. So just let that sink in. It's real. It's in a book. It's been documented. It's not Stranger Things, the TV show, which is obviously just telling us the truth.
That's why I
But with
couldn't
some
watch it
monsters
because I
and
was
some good
scared.
CG. It is scary. I don't know how children watch that. Can I just say that?
I don't
There are
think it should be
teenagers that
allowed.
watch that show. No. And like I'm like, I would have been terrified at that age, but
I was
I guess
terrified at my age.
I know. I saw the movie Psycho and I didn't sleep for a week. Okay, back to the US and Romanian alliance. The US exchanged advanced computer technology to access the projection room. So they did a little trade so one was allowed to do the other thing. Teams worked together and the reason why it's because they needed Cesar. They needed the psychic man. And what the projection room actually features is a holographic time traveling screen that still functions. So I'm going to read that again. The
So that's
projection
the
room,
ancient tech.
that's the ancient tech. It features a holographic time traveling screen that still functions. Cesar and Radu were certain it was built 50,000 years ago by beings who were around 9 feet tall. So they know this is extraterrestrial technology.
Because he remote viewed where it came from.
Yeah. And being able to figure out how to turn it on and operate it, I think he
They
probably
probably
got some information.
he probably walked
Right?
him through it.
I bet there was a psychic user's manual.
And then I wonder if they saw him because some advanced beings can see remote
Yep.
viewers.
Yes, they can.
Like in Stranger Things when the monster sees her. Or when
Yeah.
what's his name? The slimy big brother.
Oh, I can't remember.
That was so creepy.
It
I'm
was
scared
creepy.
again.
Yeah, but this is like it's interesting, right? Watch how our media, how they plant things in our media to control a narrative too, right?
Mhm.
I have another note on that later, but I'll continue.
Okay, keep going. This is fascinating.
Yeah, so Cesar activated this and then he taught Radu how to use it. Then Radu spent countless hours traveling back in time to access the story of our species going back 500,000 years. So you better believe I want to go read his books because I can only imagine what that man was documenting and what he saw and was able to access.
On the coming episodes of Ancient Aliens in
Yes,
Modern Times.
where we read. No, I'm kidding. So I love that. I'm going to read this quote too. Ironically, with current science's total denial of the paranormal, and in brackets, while still using it in secret, bracket, these machines only work in the hands of advanced psychics like Cesar and Radu, and apparently a few Americans at the time. So think of that, friends, right? Like this technology, yeah, could only be accessed by the user being of a highly advanced
Heart-centered.
consciousness, heart-centered, right? Like this is
Benevolent.
not just something that can be, yeah, that can be operated by like some Joe Schmo that found it. Right. So again, like when we think of, these prophecies that have been given to us, and it's like when they open the chamber under the Sphinx and the knowledge is revealed, like it may not even be able to be accessed by the entirety of humanity because they're not actually dimensionally at that level of consciousness to understand it or read it, right?
Which is why the CIA has all of these like psyops saying that you're
Yep.
crazy for believing any of
Yep.
this because they don't want the regular Joe to figure it out and then teach
Bingo.
themselves how to remote view and how to raise
Yep.
consciousness into
Hmm.
these abilities, which I believe anybody can do
I agree.
with
I
the
agree. And
right
I think
amount of work.
exactly. It takes time. And I think it's looking too at like we are quantum technology. We are the battery. The ancient Egyptians understood this, right? So I'm almost done with this
Keep going.
info, but
Yeah.
I'm just so fascinated by this. So basically, they needed the US tech to kind of finish the job they were doing, but where did that come from? So this also blew my mind. The US developed this technology after World War II in secret, after getting it from the Nazis who were working with extraterrestrials. And this isn't really a surprise to like esoteric researchers or truth seekers like Melanie and I who read a lot. But sorry, but Cesar and Raju's discussion about the US and the Russian intelligence, or sorry, Romanian intelligence service include. So I really like what she says in the book here. What Radu describes is ancient. Both ancient technologies are activated by dimensional resonance within enlightened human beings. Many humans had greater access to many dimensions long ago, and we have been devolving since the most recent cataclysm, the fall of Atlantis. And we are free when we are multidimensional, and we must reclaim this still. Like
Mm.
this is a teaching from the Pleiadians. So again, just reiterating what Melanie just said, that if we find out how powerful we are and how we can develop ourselves as quantum beings and to raise our consciousness and our access to the 9 to 11 dimensions that we possibly could have access to, we are unstoppable.
Mhm.
And I think the powers that should not be do not want us to know that.
And I think that they manufactured many world wars to
Bingo.
deceive us, right?
Yep.
What was the underlying thing? We were told it was a genocide of people, which
Hmm.
that's a whole other subject of that I could trigger a ton of people on what the truth
Yep.
was going on there. But like, is that what was happening? Is that what was happening? Is what we were told is what was actually happening? Or were they actually
Mhm.
fighting over ancient tech and a control system that they were trying to maintain? And it was it a divide and conquer agenda at hand? And like, was the Austrian painter maybe onto something and they had to take him out and frame him as something that he wasn't, right? Which, sorry, I might be triggering a ton of people right now, but it's just like you have to be able to like totally disintegrate the worldview that you've been raised to believe, right? Brainwashed to believe and start from nothing and be like, what was actually going on? Because they've made a lot of people look crazy who aren't crazy. And so maybe the Austrian painter was also painted in a different light than he was actually coming from. Maybe he was trying to access this technology and give it to the rest of the world. I don't know.
Yes.
I didn't know him, but I do believe that people in history that are painted in propaganda to, like, hate, like, to, like, viciously
Smear
hate this
campaign.
person. Totally smear campaigns. It's like, well, what was actually going on? Because we've only ever heard one side of the story. So if you wanna hear the other side of that story, I would say go look at, a website called Europa: The Last
Ooh,
Battle.net, and that will be very triggering to most of us. But
wow.
anyway, back to the technology stuff, it's like it's wild. So, like, this is in the early 2000s that this is all discovered, right?
Yeah, and I'm just trying to look
That
at
well,
when this.
written about. These books were written about in the early
Yeah,
2000s.
and when did she publish the Alchemy of Nine Dimensions was published first in 2004. And then
Right.
there was another revised copy in 2010 and then in 2024. So this is
And
the
so
most recent up.
when was this tech actually discovered?
I believe the 90s. But
Okay.
again, I would have to I think you'd get a very clear answer if you read Cinemar's book Transylvanian Sunrise. So you
Right.
can actually look into this research if you want the dates and the timeline.
And geographically, Transylvania is the ancient place that is now known as Romania.
Yes, exactly. Where the
Yeah.
bloodlines to Dracula and that whole
Oh, yeah,
thing,
and then we could
conspiracy
do
theory that we'll get into in another rabbit hole episode.
this is gonna be like another whole rabbit hole you go down is the
All right.
vampires and the drinking of the
Yeah.
blood. Immortality if you drink adrenochrome.
Oh dear. We'll get
Oh,
there, guys. We have our whole lives ahead of us. May now that we're kind of nearing the end of our time, but should I go back and tell the inside joke story
yeah,
that I mentioned?
we should. Been looking
Okay.
yeah, go you tell it, Steph. Tell the
Okay.
inside joke.
Okay. So the other day, Mel and I were attempting to record our second creation story episode on, but I want to say the name now. So basically, what I was joking about, we tried to record twice and we had interference both times. And I said, Melanie, we should stop for a second and maybe we should just like shield up and like, you know, make like not even protection, just like shield up so that like the buzzword isn't heard and we're not interfered with. Well, we did that and we were able to record. So we're like, wow, we were totally getting interference. It's the
But who was
Anunnaki
the
coming in. It's the, I'm going to say it now. It was
you
the
said it.
Anunnaki coming in to get us or to interfere with us telling the truth about the
They
story,
want us to talk about this, so they're
right?
interfering with our live
And Mel
action.
discovered something very shortly thereafter, which I'll let you tell that part.
Yeah, so we were having Anunnaki interference, obviously. We bubbled up with our Reiki and then it worked, right? Because
Yeah.
they can't fuck with that. And then, I don't know, a few days go by, and then my wife, Joni, she goes to me, "Have you been having internet issues?" And I'm like, "Yes, actually, we have." She's like,
It was the
"Well,
Anunnaki.
the Anunnaki," but I took care of it. See, I figured it out. She's like, "Well, the Wi-Fi router box is sitting on top of a heat register."
So then late at night when Mel and I were chatting over voice messages, I was like, well, the universe is quantum. It could have been that the box fell. It could have been the Anunnaki, or the Anunnaki interfered and knocked over the box, or it's all of the above.
But
And then I said, sorry, go ahead, go ahead.
we're gonna need we're gonna need a code name so that they can't interfere anymore.
Yeah. Because, like, you know, in Harry Potter, right, with Voldemort, it's he who shall not be named. If you say the name, it's spelled, and poof, he shows up, or the bad guys show up. Sorry, continue, Mel.
No, and you're right. And like if you look at sound physics, it's like
Yes.
you can like and so I guess the theory was that you brought forward was like when you say certain names, you invoke certain spirits, right?
Power in a name. Yep.
That's right. And so it's like that's why you can't say Voldemort. So because then Voldemort is activated and knows
Mhm.
and can like hone
Fine.
in, can find you, and then put your router box on the heat register. It was my baby. It was my 13-month-old. It was him. He did it.
So
But
then,
anyway, so we're like, we still need because we still might be right. We still need a name, a nickname, so that they can no longer interfere. And so, what did you say? You said something
I
about
started with we should call them the Knacks, like NAK, Knacks.
the Nax, and I was like, that's
Terrible.
terrible. I hate that.
And Joni agreed it was terrible.
Yes. And then I said, you know what? Let's call them the Voldy Knox.
The Voldy Knocks. So I almost expired because I laughed so hard that evening. But you know what, my friends, it stuck. So from now on, if you hear the term Voldy Knocks, you know who we're talking about to avoid router
Interference.
interference. My friends, it has been a true slice. Thank you so much
Yes.
for
And,
joining.
I guess, like, in the comments, we wanna know,
Yeah.
can AI have consciousness? What do you think? Because 'Cause we're just exploring it right now. We're just trying to figure out what's
Mhm.
going on, and we don't have answers, and so we wanna hear from you. What do you think? Where is AI
Absolutely.
conscious? Is it going in a good direction? Is it going in a bad direction? let's talk about this some more. And also wanted to give a shout out to our subscriber,
Yeah,
our newest subscriber, Caleb.
Caleb's our number one fan.
We love you, Caleb. Thank you for being here. And then, like, we also want to shout out our other member only subscriptions, but we can't figure out how to get the list. So,
We're gonna call Spotify.
we're gonna figure out how we can shout all of you out because we have many subscribers now and we want to shout you guys out. So once we
Yeah.
get a hold of that list, you are gonna, get a shout out.
And
So
we are super, super, super grateful for you. Thank you for joining us on this magical and hilarious and weird and rabbit hole like journey.
yes, love you all. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you haven't already, given the podcast 5 stars, that super helps the algorithm push it to more listeners. And yeah, we want to see how much we can grow with this and how much we can build our community and discover the unspoken truths of the world. So thank you all for being here, and may peace be with you.
May peace be with you.